Welcome to the 111th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with J.L. Bourne, author of the By Day Armageddon series. Well, welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is J.L. Bourne, the author of the By Day Armageddon series. The latest book in the series, By Day Armageddon, Shattered Hourglass, was just published. John, thanks for doing the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to go ahead and I'd like to read to your listeners a couple paragraphs from Shattered Hourglass, if that's okay with you.
That would be great.
Okay. Page 1. Shattered Hourglass, 1 November. Panama Canal, Task Force Hourglass. Chaos, pure and complete. The scene below resembles an area following a Category 5 hurricane or aerial bombardment. The many canal structures still remained at the whim of the elements, showing creeping signs of decay and neglect. The jungle was already beginning to reclaim the canal regions, commencing a long bid to erase any evidence that man had split the continents a century before. Soulless figures walked about, searching, reacting to the firing of dead synapses. A corpse wearing only a mechanic's work shirt shuffled about the area. The mechanic had met its demise via the barrel of a Panamanian soldier's rifle back when the national curfew was still being enforced. He became it shortly after the punctured heart stopped and the body temperature began to fall, letting loose the mystery that reanimated dead people. The anomaly, as it was known, spread quickly throughout the mechanic's nervous system, altering key areas of sensory anatomy. It anchored and replicated in the brain, but only in the sections where primal instinct developed and restored via DNA and electrochemical switches from eons of evolution. Along its path of self-replication and infection, the anomaly made a quick stop inside the ear canal. There it microscopically altered the physical makeup of the inner ear ossicles, enhancing the hearing. The eyes were the last stop. After a few hours of reanimation, the anomaly completed replication and replacement of certain cellular structures inside the eye, resulting in rudimentary short-range thermal sensory ability, balancing its death-degraded vision. The former mechanic stopped and cocked its head sideways. It could hear noise in the distance, something familiar, a nanosecond flash of audible recognition. Then it was gone and forgotten. The sound grew louder, exciting the creature, causing salivation. Translucent gray fluid dribbled from its chin, hitting its bare and nearly skeletal leg. The mechanic took a step forward in the direction of the noise. The open tendons on top of its foot flexed and pulled the small foot bones as it moved. The creature sensed that the increasing sound was not natural, was not the wind or incessant rain noises it normally ignored. The creature's pace quickened as it reached a small patch of dense jungle trees. A snake struck out as the mechanic entered the foliage, slapping dead flesh and leaving 2 small holes in its nearly gone calf muscle. The creature paid no attention and continued to slog forward, nearly clearing the foliage. The chorus of souls be damned boomed out from all directions as the thing broke through to the clearing. Thank you for letting me read a few paragraphs from the new novel.
Great. Well, if the listeners haven't heard of your By Day Armageddon series yet, how would you describe the series?
I would say that if they started in the beginning, it's one man's first-person account of surviving an undead apocalypse. It's what this main character does and how this main character thinks as he reacts to his new environment, an environment where he's outnumbered by millions of undead.
Great. Well, obviously, as you're aware, and the listeners are aware, zombies have really in the past I guess 4 or 5 years, really had a renaissance in popular culture with The Walking Dead comic series and then popular TV show and many others as well. In terms of your Day by Day Armageddon series, how did you first get interested in kind of the zombie mythos, if you will, and what appealed to you about writing your own take of the zombie?
Well, we have to go back in time 10 years, back to 2003, before, I guess, the zombies were cool, I guess you would say. Back then, I started off just a keyboard, a computer, and an internet connection, and I was reading some of the fiction out there in the genre, and I had a story inside of me that I wanted to tell, and I thought that maybe I could tell it just as good as those that were published out there. Were telling the story. So I went ahead and put my fingers to keyboard and began writing Day by Day Armageddon, chapter by chapter, day by day. And I started off uploading it to the internet as a serial for free. And it gained a little traction from there.
And so where were you publishing that? Was it like on a personal site or what site were you uploading it?
Yes, it was on a personal site that no longer exists. It was just uploaded with a rudimentary HTML editor where I would just upload it and chapter by chapter. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was gaining readership. I didn't have any type of web counter or any way to know how much it was, how much interest it was gaining. But it gained some interest as the months went on, and as the story unfolded, I started getting some emails from folks out there in on the World Wide Web telling me, how much they enjoyed it. And it eventually was discovered by a smaller press that picked it up.
That's great. What did you think about the whole process of publishing online? I mean, what was your thoughts? I mean, obviously you said you didn't have a web counter, so you didn't know who was reading it, and then you started getting emails.
Well, the whole process, I mean, it was just every writer has a story that he or she wants to tell. And the medium that they choose to tell it, it really doesn't define them as a writer. A writer can be someone that writes a story on his or her notepad or his or her for his or her own personal enjoyment. And I just happened to put my writing out there for everyone to scrutinize and everyone to enjoy. And the process eventually led to being published through Permuted Press, and then following on through Simon & Schuster Gallery Books.
That's great. Well, I know that you're active duty military. Were you uploading that and writing the story while you were stationed overseas?
I was doing that while overseas for some time, but in the military we don't spend all of our time overseas, so I did a lot of it while I was stateside as well, serving in the military.
Sure.
I've had numerous tours of duty in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. So I've definitely done some of my writing overseas, and some of my writing has been influenced by those experiences.
And so that's kind of interesting. I mean, were you do you feel like, I mean, have you given it much thought? Did that kind of take your mind off sometimes of being, in country, so to speak, to be working on this story that you were working on?
It really does. It's kind of a therapy type thing if you think about it. Some of the pressures and daily travails at work, a lot of them are the same as the ones that people that go to the cubicles every day and they do important jobs with their companies. They experience the same kind of stresses that I might experience overseas. It's just the way it's leveraged is a little bit different.
Sure. So
my typical day at the office when I'm deployed, it does involve pressure and it does involve long work hours, but some people experience that, at stateside with their jobs as well.
Sure. So I'm just curious, had you written any fiction prior to sitting down and starting the first Day by Day Armageddon book?
I had written some fiction. No one's ever seen it but myself. But yes, I had sat down and wrote some stories. I have not been formally trained on how to write anything. I've never, taken a class on creative writing or anything like that, other than the normal undergrad type college classes you would take to graduate undergrad, get your degree that way. So I've not been formally or classically trained as a writer. I just kind of picked it up and put pen to paper and just made it happen.
Sure. And were you a big reader as well? Did that kind of drive you into writing?
Oh, no, not at all. I would probably be if you were to classify me on a scale of readers, 10 being a voracious reader, 1 being a guy that reads reads a newspaper every now and then, I'd probably be closer to like a 2 on that scale.
That's interesting. So what do you find about your writing process now? Do you do any outlining and thinking ahead of time in terms of the storyline, or are you more of an organic writer and just kind of see where things go?
I'm kind of organic. I think that when this is my opinion only, and it's free opinion, and that's probably what it's worth, as much as people pay to hear it, is that organic writing is the best way for me to tell a story. I feel that once you structure a story, you sort of box it in ahead of time. When you write a story organically and it unfolds on its own, I think that's, for me at least, when the creative process really kind of happens.
Sure. And I'm curious, I mean, you said, as you explained, you were originally published by Permuted Press, and then they have a co-publishing deal with Simon and Schuster. Given that you published the first book online, as you mentioned, just in this kind of rudimentary website that you were uploading, have you given any thought now to maybe experimenting with ebooks? Or you the relationship with Simon and Schuster kind of takes care of what you're writing now?
You have always been very good to me and always been there for me when I was deployed overseas and the deadlines would come up and they would work with me. So I do have loyalty to those that have loyalty to me. So, any type of ebook venture that I would get into, that I would write, I would obviously I'd give Simon and Schuster and Permuted a look at it, and we'd go from there. I'm not quite ready, or I don't really think that right now is the good time to jump into the self-published ebook realm and just kind of throw your work out there to the shark pit and see what happens.
Sure.
I think that I'm going to remain structured, at least in the near term. And as things evolve, which they will evolve, trust me, this conversation will be a different one 10 years from now when everyone's doing it that way, where they're just going to bypass publishers and go out there and flood the market with their fiction and just see what survives. I think that's going to be more of the future of publishing.
Sure.
That's kind of how things are evolving from my point of view.
Right. So given your kind of unique take on, publishing this novel originally online and then taking the response and the positive response and popularity and working with Permuted Press and the books that you've written in the series so far, what advice would you have for someone who may be listening and is an aspiring writer trying to kind of, work on their own stories?
Okay. Well, to me, this is kind of a question near and dear to my heart. Writing and getting published was never my goal. I'll say that very honestly. Not once have I ever sought out a publisher. Not once have I mailed one manuscript to any publisher. That's just not something I've ever done. It wasn't my goal in the beginning. My goal in the beginning was to write a story that people would want to read and to write something from the heart. And that was my goal in the beginning. And to me, that's the only real way to succeed. Is you can't write with the ambition of getting published, because to me, that's great, but it's still very underwhelming. It's not a big deal to me. To me, the big deal is the story and writing something that people want to read and that people grow to love and people will talk about long after I'm shoveled into my grave.
That's good advice. So what are you working on now?
Well, right now I've got some things going on with Simon and Schuster. I've got a project I'm working on now. Of course, my military obligations have my primary focus. But when I'm not working and I get a chance to go home and, be with my family and I get some free time, then I work on that at night. And there is a project pending right now. I really can't speak about it at this moment because it's still ongoing and still being discussed about how it's going to be rolled out. But I do have something going on there. I'm not a traditional writer in a sense. I've never called myself a writer. Like I said, most writers that are out there doing this for a living, they pump out a couple books a year and they do a lot of book signings and a lot of publicity. That really isn't me. I'm an active duty naval officer, and I'm lucky to get one book out in a year based on my full-time obligation. I don't write for a living. I just do it as a hobby and as an enjoyment, as an outlet for the things I've seen and things I've experienced in the military and other places. So it's not really, I never really called myself a writer. To be honest with you, I've always kind of laughed when people say I'm a writer. I don't take myself too seriously when it comes to labeling myself with that title.
Sure. And what do people who are who work with you in the Navy, what do they think about your books?
Well, I don't discuss it. It's no secret. I write under a pseudonym, and people, I just don't discuss. I don't discuss that aspect. I don't offer it as something for them to know about. If every now and then someone somehow figures it out and they come up to me discreetly and they'll, say, hey, I didn't know you did all this. And then I'll ask them how they found out and this and that. And they'll say they recognize my voice from something like this, a podcast, or they'll recognize me from some very obscure small clip where I happen to be uploaded to the internet or something like that. So It's not something that I publicize or as you notice, if you've looked at any of my books, I don't stand there with my glamorous shot of me with an American flag waving in the background, standing there with authority as I've written a book and I'm great and I want everyone to see me. It's not the kind of person I am. I'm a very private individual.
Sure. Well, obviously this podcast is primarily about obviously books and writing and reading, but given your background and your experience, what do you feel? And if you do, I mean, what would you want, someone listening, an American who's listening, what would you want them to take away that maybe they haven't thought about or haven't considered or, from your unique perspective of the operations that are going on currently in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Well, as a tool of our elected civilian leadership, it's not really appropriate for me to comment on my, how I feel about all this. I'm in the military 18 years. As of the time of this podcast, I've got 18 years in the military. And most of that's been at war, as you know, if you can count back 10, so I'm tired. I can say that. And I think that my brothers and sisters out there that have been with me for 10 years are tired as well. We're weary. And that's not a political statement. Sure. That is just a fact.
No, I mean, I wasn't tired, I wasn't really thinking about it from a political statement. I guess let me rephrase this a little bit. I mean, given your unique position, as opposed to someone who's not, active duty military, is there anything that you would think that, that someone who's not active duty could possibly do to, to support, what you guys are doing on a basic human, level, not, leaving politics aside?
Sure. On a basic human level, the best way to support is to stay informed, and what I mean by that is staying apolitical. In this podcast, Americans that are informed of the current events and of the issues of the day and of how things are going, and Americans that are well versed on the United States Constitution and what it says in there, I think will and trickle down effect will cause positive change and positive things to happen in the country for my American readers. If you're not in the military, You're the same to me. We're all Americans, and those that are in the military that are the spear tip or the pointy end of our offensive capability that are out there every day, they definitely know, how policy affects things that happen overseas. And I think that if you're not part of that system, you're still part of the system, because as you know, the military, we don't produce things. We are consumers of your tax dollars. So you're part of that chain because you're the producers. Those of you listening out there that aren't in the military, you're producing so we can consume, so we can affect policy. And as informed as you can become through reading the news, through things like that, and through just staying informed of current events, the more informed you'll be when you go to the polls, and you can decide on your end how your tax dollars are spent. That's the best way to affect, to help, to stay informed.
Great. Well, again, we've been speaking with J.L. Bourne, the author of the Day by Day Armageddon series. It's available in bookstores now, available as ebooks as well. And the latest book in the series, Day by Day Armageddon Shattered Hourglass, was just published, so check that out as well. And I'll have a link in the show notes to JL's website, and you can check out all the books there. JL, thanks for doing this interview.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I'd like all you out there that are listening to just keep the faith, write something every day, whether or not you feel like you're going to publish it or not. Just sit down and write something every day. You never know where that one day of inspiration is going to bring you. It might bring you to your next published novel.
Great. That's some great words. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
If you've got a passion for pumpkin, you've got to get to Dunkin' and pick these up. Our new Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew. Smooth, bold cold brew topped with velvety pumpkin cream cold foam. And our delicious Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte. Rich espresso topped with whipped cream, caramel drizzle, and cinnamon sugar. And our perfectly pumpkin donuts, munchkins treats, pumpkin muffins, and more. That's how we pumpkin at Dunkin'. Pick your pumpkin at Dunkin', like our new Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew, Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte, and our perfectly pumpkin treats. America runs on Dunkin'. Price and participation may vary. Limited time offer. Exclusions apply.
Hear that? Is that America cheering or a sausage patty sizzling to perfection? It's time to cheer for Egg McMuffin and fresh cracked eggs at McDonald's. It's time to wake up to the aroma of freshly baked biscuits and treat yourself to a real honest-to-goodness morning meal. Breakfast, it's on at McDonald's. Now enjoy a large iced coffee for just $2 and a breakfast sandwich to make a meal. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal.